a 2-week series. Last week we talked about what you are as a Christian and what you're expected to do as a Christian. Just kind of laid it out. And we'll talk about some of that again today in today's sermon, just what it is you're expected to do. But then today, I wanted to take that personal command. You know, sometimes we talk about having a personal relationship with Jesus, and you're expected to have a personal connection there. But it's not just personal. It's what we do together and how we do it together, how we do it as a church. And I wanted to talk about that just a little bit too. You know, over the last few weeks and months, since March, as the COVID virus has shut down a lot of the economy and shut down certainly a lot of churches, it's been harder to know how we're doing on things. Before, I was able to grade how we were doing on some impersonal things. I could grade it on our attendance. Well, our attendance is about what it was last year, or maybe we're a little above or a little below last year. And you could grade how you're doing, or the offering. Well, the offering is here, and it used to be here, and so see, we've had a little growth. Or maybe you could grade it on participation in our programs. If we do VBS, and we could grade how many volunteers we had, or our small groups, and how many people were in the small groups. You could chart that, and you could grade it. And you say, well, see, here we're doing okay, because look here, and look here, and look at this other thing. But with the COVID stuff, there's not really been those benchmarks that were normally there to grade it, to know how you were doing. And there's been a little bit of with me at least, a bit of a low-level stress about that. Not that I thought we were failing, but just that I had no idea really how we were doing. There's a lot of verses in Scripture that talk about if you're a leader in the church, and I think that I'm a leader in the church, if you're a leader in the church, that there's a certain accountability for people like that. One verse to kind of focus on is in Hebrews. It says, have confidence in your leaders and submit to their authority, because they keep watch over you as those who must give an account. Now, there's other verses like this. Jesus takes this same idea and says it in a lot more picturesque language. He says, if you lead one of my little ones to sin, you'd be better off to have a millstone hung around your neck and tossed into the sea. James takes a passage in James 3. He says, teachers must be careful, because we who teach are going to be judged more strictly. But I like this one here, because the implication of this one is that one day, those of us who make a decision to be leaders in any sort of form or fashion are going to have to give an account. Now, what that doesn't mean is that you're going to stand on your own. When you stand before God, you're going to stand on what you've decided and what you've done and what you've lived. You can't point to me and say, well, he ruined it for me. You can't, even if I did, you can't point to me, and it's going to be on you, right? But this verse seems to say that I'm also going to bear some account for that. If I've led people down a wrong path, that God's watching that thing, and that there's going to be some recompense for that. And verses like this, truthfully, intimidated me enough that I didn't really want to get into ministry when I was making that decision. They were frightening verses to me. This notion that I could do it wrong. Well, again, because of this COVID stuff, I've not been able to grade how we're doing. Are we doing okay? Am I not doing okay? I mean, even some things that were usually benchmarks for me in my week. You know, I'd go to the hospital and visit people who were there, or check on people. I'm not allowed to do those things, or not allowed to do them like I used to. And so again, it's just really hard to grade whether I'm doing it or not. And a verse like this one is just real painful to read, because I don't want to make a mistake. Now, I'm looking forward to when we can all get back together. But what has further kind of opened my eyes during this COVID time is that I really didn't know how you were doing then either. I mean, I could grade the attendance or the offering or those other things, but I didn't know for sure how we were doing. There's a verse we looked at last week that said, whoever claims to live in Jesus must walk like Jesus, or live like Jesus did. And truthfully, just seeing you for an hour on Sunday morning, I don't know if you're doing that. I don't know. And if you've been in church very long, you know that some of the meanest people in the world go to church, right? I mean, some of the most obnoxious people you've ever met go to church. They're there every week. Don't look around, but just trust me that they're here, and it's just one of those things, right? It's just one of those things. Sinners go to church, right? We're just thick with sinners here, and there's no getting away from that, right? So it's not about being perfect. It's just about making a decision that I'm going to live like Jesus. And sometimes I can see what you do here and not know exactly how you're doing. last week we talked about the expectations that I think the Bible places on people who are Christians. There are certain things that I think Christians are supposed to do. And I think, truthfully, pretty much every Bible teaching church in the world will push these things. They may not say it all exactly the same thing, but these are the things they'll push. But you need to know the Lord. You need to know the Lord, and that means you can read and you can pray and you can figure it out. You know, you can feed yourself. That's what it means. You might go to a preacher or an elder and say, "I'm going to go to this other church. I'm not getting fed here." You might say that, and that might be a poignant way for you to move on. But ultimately, you getting fed is your responsibility. It doesn't belong to anybody else. And you need to be able to do it yourself, to read and to pray. It's not about being a Bible college professor. You don't have to be the smartest guy in the world. If last week you never prayed at all, to pray even 1 minute this week might be a great victory for you. You know, so you're not trying to go from 0 to 100. You're just trying to get a little stronger all the time. And if you're a Christian, if you've made a decision to follow after Jesus, then to know Jesus, that's step number one. And if you're not doing that at all, but I wouldn't know if you was doing that when you were here before. I mean, you might come in here and seem real spiritual, but I wouldn't know if you really were reading or if you really were praying. You might even be able to say something about, "Boy, that sermon, that really hit me hard today." But I'm not going to say, "Well, then tell me, in what ways did it hit you hard? Let's talk about that." I'm not going to do that to you, right? And it would probably intimidate you if I did do that. You know, let's get a piece of paper out. Tell me the 5 ways that really helped you today. You know, so I'll know. It's just conversation we make. We just bounce off of each other. So I'm not going to know. And so even when we get back together, I'm not going to know. And this is important. So we're going to start talking about that some. And certainly, however we do church, there needs to be this push that we're all going to know Jesus. But not just know Jesus, we all have to love each other better. Jesus says in John 13:34 that they'll know you're my disciples if you love one another. That's going to be the thing that really tips people off, 34 and 35, 13, 30. So we've got to do that, right? I mean, that's one of the real tests about whether we get it or not. I have found personally, and just anecdotally, talking to different people, it seems like if a person has good connections in church, they've made friends, they've got a lot of people there that they love, and man, they're able to get through things that people who don't have that aren't able to get through. There's something about doing that investment ahead of time, putting those roots down ahead of time. Then when the storm comes, you've got some connections there. See, again, when we were doing big church, I wouldn't know necessarily if you were doing that or not. I just see you here. So whatever church model we have, whether it's during the COVID or not, I mean, part of being a Christian is building those relationships. And again, if you're a social person, this is nothing for you. We've seen this again with my son and my daughter. My daughter's going to school and now and she's not as social. My son was Mark would go to lunch an hour early to talk to folks. Right? It was nothing to him. He's going to settle down about age 35, be one of those old men at Arby's who stays there all morning. That's what Mark is headed towards. He'll be about 35 when he starts, and he'll just be there at Arby's every morning if you want to find him. He loves that stuff. It's easy for him to do. He likes it. It's harder for my daughter. And so for her, it may be more of just making 1 or 2 friends. You know, don't think you got to introduce yourself to the whole school. Just meet a few people. If you are a person who's social, then by all means, we need you out there making as many friends as you can. But and it's relationships. It's not just making friendships, casual acquaintances, but it's actually knowing people. But it's not just that. Any Bible teaching church is going to tell you that you need to serve. And that means you leverage the stuff that God's given you for the good of the kingdom. And that is your money, but it's not just your money. It's your stuff. It's your time. It's your energy. It's your gifts. It's your talent. It's your life. You know, sometimes we get into interesting conversations about when Jesus says to tithe, when God says to tithe, does he mean tithe on the net or the gross? How much percentage-wise am I supposed to give to God? The answer to that is 100%. You've got to give it all to God. That's the answer. Now, week to week in the tithe, I understand there's a 10%, and I'm less concerned about that than with the 100%. If you recognize that it's all His, and if you're a Christian, you have to recognize that. That's the deal you signed in for. He's giving you life everlasting, and you're giving him your life now. You're denying yourself and taking up your cross and following him in exchange for the righteousness that he provides. That's always been the deal. But again, when we were in big church, I might not know if you were subscribing to the deal. I might not know if you really believe that or not. And it's not just those three things that's sharing your faith. These are the big four. These are the big four. Every Bible teaching church that I'm aware of in some form or fashion will teach these things. These are what Christians do. These are the things that Christians do. They know the Lord, they love one another, they serve, and they share their faith. And you may be better at one of these things than the other. That's fine. There may be one of these things that really intimidates you a lot compared to the other three, and that's also fine. It's not about you being an expert. It's about you taking a half a step forward in obedience, right? Just doing a little more than you did before. It's not about you having it all figured out. I remember one of my first jobs was we would go into a house that was newly built, and I was to paint everything white. Big 5-gallon bucket of paint and paint everything white. And I'm trying to be careful and not drip it on the floor. And there's nothing on the floor but particle board. And I'm trying to be very careful. And my boss watches me. He says, "Tell me, son, are you an artist or a painter?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "I want all this paint on that wall as fast as you can." "Yes, sir. And I'll do it. And don't be careful. Just get it done. You know, you're worried about getting it perfect. Don't get it perfect. Just get it on there." "Yes, sir." Which is why I can't paint at home anymore, right? That's the reason. I can't help. I've been ruined forever in my painting skills. So these are the things. And so remember the verse again. We want to walk like Jesus. So I was thinking about that this week. How do we walk like Jesus? How do we get ourselves to do like him? And I've been thinking ahead of time. We're starting a Bible study this week on Galatians. I've been thinking about that. And so there's a verse in Galatians that talks about walking. And it's this one. It's Galatians 5:16. Paul says, "I say walk by the Spirit." He says, and this walking just means you live, right? So you make a decision. What does God's Spirit want me to do? And then you go that direction, whatever direction that is. And you just be as obedient to it as you can. You know, don't worry about being perfect. Just as obedient as you can. This is where God wants me to head. I'm going to head there boldly. Sometimes with the musicians, I had somebody tell me a long time, actually reminded me about it. Somebody told me last night, and I'd heard this before. If you're going to make a mistake in the band, make it loudly. Just make it as loudly as you can. You know, when you're back there being meek, you're not helping anybody. If you're going to make a mistake, just really make a mistake. You know, let everybody know it. And that's the only way to do it, right? And that's what this verse means. I'm going to walk by the Spirit. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to live out there boldly. But there's two interesting words here, this word spirit and this word flesh. He says, walk by the Spirit, and then you won't gratify the desires of the flesh. So two things kind of working in opposition to one another. The Spirit, the Greek word for that is the same word for wind, and it blows wherever it wants, Jesus says. And when the Spirit is blowing into you, you're inspired and God is leading you something, then you want to run that direction as hard as you can. When the wind is blowing, you put your sail up and you catch as much wind as you can and you go that direction. On the other hand, it says you won't gratify the desires of the flesh. The flesh just means meat, and it's the animal part of you. But it's not just the animal part of you. It's the part of you that is not interested or not thinking at all about God. It's who you are when you're not thinking at all about God. That's the flesh. And so Paul says, make a decision to live by the Spirit and not the flesh. And there's a lot of different examples of this contrast, but just one that's personal to me, right? If you're a worrier and you're a person who can obsess about things and really worry about things, and I do that. That's why it's an easy thing for me to pick at. But if you're one of those kind of people and you worry, when you're more guided by the Spirit of God, it's easy for you to pray about that. And not just pray about it, but leave some of it there with God. Now, if it's really something serious, you can't probably leave all of it there. You're probably still concerned. And it's not about tricking yourself to being happy all the time. But it's just this trust. God, I know you're watching. I know you're going to carry us through. I know you're going to give me wisdom. I know you're going to help me figure this out. And you're trusting him. God, help me accept the things I can't control. There's so much in life that you can't control. God, help me to know to accept those things, but to trust you that you're bringing it to a good end. You know, and when I'm really led by the Spirit, my worry, it eases. I can feel it going that direction. I can feel God's Spirit blowing through my life. I can feel His guidance there, and I start to let go of some of that. On the other hand, when I'm living in the flesh, it's like God's not there at all. Like there's a skillet between me and Him, just a big wall of iron between me and God, and nothing's getting through. And I'm all on my own. My worry starts doubling up on my worry. And I just get more and more frustrated and anxious, and I'm running through all the different scenarios of how it can go wrong in my head. And well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And I'm miserable to everybody because I'm just obsessed about this thing. And it's like God's not there. You know, Jesus said pagans run after all those kinds of things, but your God knows you need Him, so seek Him first. And that's when I'm living by the Spirit. That's what I'm doing. I'm seeking Him first. And I'm not going this way because, and Paul goes, this 16, in verse 17, there it is. Paul says, because these two things are working against each other. He says, the flesh desires what's contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what's contrary to the flesh. They're in conflict with each other, so you can't do what you want. And that's a kind of a hard thing to get a hold of. Most of us, right, if you might not say it just this way, but the gist of it, I trust my gut. Well, Paul's saying you can't trust your gut because your gut sometimes is going to take you a different direction than the Spirit will. You can't do whatever you want. As an example, in my own life on this, a few weeks ago I had kind of, and I get it periodically, it again goes to the worry thing, and I'm working on it, but it's just one of those things. But I would get this acid reflux. I don't get it very often, but every once in a while I'll get this acid reflux. And when I get it, I can't drink sodas. I can't drink Cokes. Cokes make it worse. But I really wanted one day when I was going through this, so I'm drinking it, and I would drink it, and it tasted so good in my mouth, and I'd swallow it, and then I'd drink it again. Right? I got it down, all of it. My wanter was broken, right? What I wanted was not taking me where I wanted it to go. When we were in California, the church camp that we supported was 4 hours away from our church. And so I drove up, I didn't stay at the week, but I drove up to get the kids at the end of the week because all the sponsors are tired and worn out. And it's up on top of this mountain. It's in the Angeles Crest Mountains, just north of the Rose Bowl there in California. And it was up out of La Cañada, and you would go up this long mountain pass. And it was 45 minutes of this, right? And so we got to the top of the hill, and the kids, they've been at camp all week. They smell like they've been at camp all week. They look like they've been at camp all week. And the adults are worn out. The adults pile in the bus, and their heads are against the window, falling asleep pretty quick, and the kids are piling in. And one of the kids, they gave you little tickets to get candy if you were good. And one of the kids had saved up his tickets all week long, and he had a bag of candy like this when he got into the deal. And I said, man, it's a tough road home. Are you sure? Oh, no, I'll be fine. Candy doesn't bother me. It's okay. And we took off down the road, and we got about 10 minutes down the road. He goes, oh, I got to stop. And so we pull off to the side of the road, and he gets out, and he's like this. He doesn't throw up, but he's just hurting. You can tell he's hurting. And after about 10 minutes, he hops back in the van, and he goes, I think I'm okay. He reaches in that candy and gets more. I said, no. I said, don't do that. I said, don't do that. I said, we're going to have to stop again. He goes, no, it's not the candy. I think it's the altitude. Altitude sickness, I think, is what it is. And 5 minutes later, we had to stop again, right? And he didn't make it the second time. The second time, he's having trouble, and so I snatched that candy away from him, and you can get that when we get down the mountain. But again, your wanter's broken, right? And I wouldn't, most of you have a story. Most of you have a story of where your wanter took you someplace it shouldn't have took you. It's just the nature of the world we live in. It's the sin that's part of our lives. And Paul says it's just your flesh. And the flesh desires what's contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit desires. So the key here is to realize that your gut may not take you where you want to go. But if we want to live by the Spirit, then we got to keep in step with Him. This keep in step could also be translated walk the line, which I think is a Johnny Cash song with that. But it's that same idea. You walk the straight line, right? We're going to live by the Spirit. Let's keep in step with the Spirit. Let's walk the line. If it's what we're going to do. And so Paul says, we're talking to Christians here, right? And that may not be everybody in this room. And it may not be everybody watching on the live stream that we're doing. Maybe some people are watching and they have not made any commitment at all to Jesus. Well, then this is just food for thought for you. But if you are somebody who's made a decision for the Lord, you want to live by the Spirit, then you got to walk the line, right? You've got to make a decision that that's the direction you're going to go. So think about, again, the list of things. Your gut may not take you to any of these things. But this is what he's called us to do. I do miss getting together in the big church. I do. I miss it. I miss the big crowd. It's fun in a band to play when the crowd's full and the voices, a lot of people and it's crowded. It's fun. It's enjoyable to do, and it's just fun to be in the middle of it. It's fun to be in a crowd when it's passionate. You know, when you think about times in your life where you said, "I went to this thing and man, the Spirit was really moving." Often, it was a crowded moment. Maybe something at camp where a lot of people were there, or something at a conference and everybody was there and they were all focused. And there's something about being with a large crowd of people and we're all about the same thing, and you really feel like God's moving in that stuff, and that is exciting. And it's cool. It's cool in the big crowd that a person could check it out kind of anonymously, right? I mean, a person could come in and just listen for a while. And nobody really knows who they are. And they're just kind of sitting in the back and they're listening for a while and they leave and they may take them a few weeks and they'll figure it out. Have you ever been to a church where you were the only visitor there and it was obvious to you and everybody that you were the only visitor there? I've done that before. And like everybody's looking at you when you walk in, but they don't want to, they pretend like they're not looking, but they're looking. All of them are, right? And they're all seeing you. Little kids are turning, who is that? And shh, don't look at them. And then you're in the back and you're trying to be good about it, but everybody knows you're the unusual one who made it that week. It's cool when you don't feel that. You can just show up and nobody knows. You know, nobody knows. That's awesome when you can do that. And I hope we can do that again. I do. But the danger about the anonymous part is that once you've made a decision to be a Christian, and you've made a decision to follow him, some Christians who are Christians, they keep relying on the anonymous part. They don't ever let themselves be known that much. So no one really knows if they're feeding themselves or building relationships or, you know, like on this building relationships one, there were people who I saw every week before March who I've not seen at all since March. And when I would see them every week, we would talk about the same stupid things. Hey, how you doing? I'm doing great. And all the teams that I like are awful. Every team I like is awful. So it was always, I had somebody to commiserate with. How about them Colts? Oh man, the Colts. You know, how about them Reds? Oh, the Reds. I hope they figure it out. Every team I like is terrible. And so we would talk about that in the foyer. Pacers going to get it done this year? No, I don't think they're going to get it done this year. And it's the same thing. Even IU and Purdue, it seems like there's always something to complain about. And you talk about that stuff, and you'd think that, well, we've got a relationship. And then I don't see them at all since March. And they don't see me either, and it's anonymous. It's social, but it's not real. And once you've made a decision to be a Christian, you know, you made a decision to follow him, then that being anonymous can kind of work against you a little bit. You need to have some people who are asking you, how you doing? And they really care because they know you, and you're bouncing off of them. Part of why we're starting this thing, we're starting it this week. Now, you don't have to start this week if it's the first year hearing about it or you've not made any plans. You don't have to start this week. But part of the reason we're encouraging people to get together in smaller groups is because with this COVID thing going on, I know it may be scary for some people to get together, all of us, but man, find 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 couples, and just get together. And if you don't know what to teach or what to speak on, starting on Wednesday, we're going to go through Galatians. And we're going to take 8 weeks to go through Galatians. So we won't quite get a chapter a week done. And we're just going to go through and talk about a 30-minute Bible study online. And then if you want to be part of it, we can send you some questions. And you can go, you know, so 30 minutes you'll watch together, ask 2 or 3 questions, pray, and you're done. But the benefit of all this is that you're actually getting to know some people. And some of the questions we're going to ask each other are going to be questions about stuff like this. Well, how are you doing? And trying to push people to go a little deeper. And I know that may be frightening. for you for a lot of reasons. Maybe you say, well, I don't want to do your stupid Bible study. Well, I don't have to do my stupid Bible. You can do another Bible study. If you need help figuring something out, we can work with you and try to figure that out. Well, you may say, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm the COVID thing. Well, find the 3 healthiest couples you know, right? the three most vibrant, full of life couples that you know. Start there. And invite them to your house, and you can all sit in different corners of the house, and yell at one another through the hallway, and just start as small as you need to start to feel comfortable about this thing. And we've got several groups going who have committed. I think 15 or 20 groups that are going to try to start for this 8-week deal. If you're interested in being part of one of those groups, talk to me and I'll try to let you know where things are at. Or if you are still interested in starting something like that, I'll help you figure it out. Again, we're not shooting at this point for Bible professors. We're not shooting for people to have to know all the answers to every last stupid thing. We just want to help people get to know each other better. Because when you get to know each other better, then you can start getting into some of this stuff. You won't get into all of it. You won't, but you need that. I don't know how to. You need it. My daughter's at IUPUI, and one thing that the school there has done is what I think most schools have done, colleges, is the big lectures. They don't bring you into a lecture hall now. They just do it online. And if it's just got a guy up in front lecture and you can watch that at home as easy as you can go to a big lecture hall. So they're saying, just watch it online and we'll Zoom it together and we can, even some of the discussion stuff they can do on Zoom, and we're not going to get face to face. But my daughter wants to be a nurse. Now she may change her mind on this, but that's what she wants to be right now. And to be a nurse, you're going to have to go through some labs. And they can't duplicate that online. You're going to actually have to tough it out, put a mask on and go do this. I don't know what they're doing in the labs, but their anatomy and stuff. Maybe she'll get to touch a cadaver. I don't know. But you go do these things, right? And this is part of the deal. And you can't duplicate that at home, even with a roommate who's willing to let you work on them there. You're going to have to go to the labs to do that, right? These small groups that we're talking about, that's the labs. That's what the labs are. You're going to have to put yourself out there and actually try to live the Christian life. And when you're doing it, right, like you're going through Galatians and you're trying to understand it a little better, you're going to find that you know God better. And you're going to find that you build these relationships because you're talking to each other. And you're going to leverage your gifts because maybe one guy does the teaching and one guy prays and another person brings the food. And this person says, well, I'll watch the kids this week and I'll watch them next week. And you're all using your gifts. You're all helping each other. And before you know it, you're speaking up. And it's just putting your faith in action in a way that you can't do if you stay anonymous. There was a guy in the Bible who figured that out, a guy named Nicodemus. And Nicodemus was a brilliant teacher of Israel. I mean, everybody knew who Nicodemus was. And when Jesus started preaching, Nicodemus was worried about Jesus. He didn't understand what was going on. And so he goes to Jesus at night. He doesn't want anybody to see him. And he sneaks up to Jesus. He says, listen, I know you've got something going on. No one could do the things that you're doing unless God was with him. And Jesus won't do any of that small talk. He says, Nicodemus, you have to be born again. And it bothers him. He's an old man. How can an old man go back and be born again? He says, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something spiritual. The wind blows and you have to be born again. The Spirit's moving and you've got to be born again. And this is what we're talking about in all this stuff. It's dropping the anonymous stuff. It's taking a step forward and say, okay, I'll try it. We'll just see where it goes. I'll put my sails up and I'll see where God takes me and we'll just try it. When a person is baptized, they go up and the old person goes into the water and the new person comes out and they're born again. And you can make that decision whenever you want to. And for some of you who have made a decision a long time ago to be a Christian, but you've stayed back in the shadows, you've not really done the things that God wants you to do, then you can still choose at any moment. If you think about your own life and you can see that your wanter is taking you down roads that it shouldn't take you down, you can change whenever you want. You have such power and control over your life. You can't even imagine. And it just starts with a choice to put him first. And when you do that, he moves. Now, we aren't doing an invitation still. Probably for another few weeks, we aren't doing an invitation because we can't get these big groups together praying hard with each other. We're trying to be as careful as we can. But I certainly can talk to any one of you privately if you want to talk. And if anybody needs to make any sort of a decision about any of this, at the end of the service, I just encourage you to come up and we'll talk. Try to figure it out best we can. Let me pray for you.